Welcome to Sinister States.
The envelope wasn't addressed to me. That was the first thing I noticed. It had my apartment number, my street, even the correct postal code, but the name typed neatly in the center was someone else's. No return address. No postage stamp either, which meant it hadn't passed through any official system. Someone had slipped it under my door. I remember standing there in the dim hallway light, keys still in my hand, staring at it longer than necessary. I almost left it on the shoe rack by the stairs. Curiosity is a small, quiet voice. Regret is much louder. I picked it up. Inside was a folded tourist map. At least, that's what I thought it was. Glossy paper, standard travel layout, bright colors marking beaches, hiking trails, heritage landmarks, scenic overlooks. Across the top, in friendly blue lettering, it read, 2026 Global Explorer Edition. Beneath that, in smaller print, Discover Tomorrow. It looked like something you'd grab for free at an airport kiosk. Except several locations were circled in thick red ink. Not neat circles either. Aggressive ones. As if someone had pressed the marker too hard. There were 7 circles. At first, I assumed it was a prank. Maybe a marketing stunt. Some viral ARG campaign gearing up for the new year. But when I unfolded the legend in the corner, I saw something that didn't belong on any travel brochure. A small black symbol had been added next to certain destinations. It wasn't printed, it had been stamped. A hollow triangle with a line through it. Next to the symbol, someone had typed a warning and taped it carefully over the original legend. Non-viable for civilian presence. Q3 2026. I felt that metallic taste in my mouth people talk about when adrenaline hits. I told myself it was elaborate fiction, yet my eyes kept drifting back to the red circles. I recognized 2 of the places immediately. One was a coastal town in Italy that had recently gone viral for its turquoise water. The other was a remote forest trail in Canada popular with van lifers and travel vloggers. Neither were known danger zones. Quite the opposite. They were trending. I checked the date on the map. Printed, January 2026 release. But the annotations looked older, as if someone had been studying this map for months. The red ink had slightly bled into the fibers of the paper that I should have thrown it away. Instead, I laid it flat on my kitchen table and started researching the first circled location. The Italian town was called Porto Vercelli. According to travel blogs, it was set to become the hidden gem of 2026. New resorts, cruise ship expansions, influencers already booking summer collaborations. I scrolled through recent posts tagged with the town's name. Sunsets, Aperol spritz glasses clinking, drone footage over limestone cliffs. Then I filtered by most recent. The tone shifted. A girl from Manchester had posted a thread about hearing sirens at night. Constant sirens, though no emergency vehicles ever appeared. A couple from Berlin uploaded a shaky video from their balcony. The sea was unusually calm. Too calm. The caption read, "Does anyone else feel like the water's getting closer?" Comments underneath were dismissive at first. Tides change. Weather patterns. Overreaction. Then the account went silent. I leaned back in my chair and told myself this was coincidence. Social media exaggeration. I switched to local news in Italian and translated articles through an online tool. There had been reports of temporary evacuations in certain waterfront blocks due to structural instability. No elaboration. No images. The most recent article was oddly brief. 3 paragraphs. It mentioned subsurface shifts. Subsurface shifts. I glanced at the map again. Next to Porto Vercelli, stamped in black, was the hollow triangle symbol. The second location was in Canada. A forest trail called Blackroot Passage. Popular for its isolation. The kind of place people visit specifically to disconnect. The trailhead had a wooden archway and a carved sign warning hikers to respect the quiet. It sounded poetic, almost romantic. Recent forum posts told a different story. Hikers describing strange static in their GPS devices. Compass needles drifting. One man wrote that the forest felt rearranged, like landmarks had moved. His post ended mid-sentence. His account never updated again. Search and rescue reports listed 3 missing persons from that region in the last 2 months. Officials attributed it to harsh terrain and unpredictable weather. Yet weather logs showed clear skies on the days they disappeared. I began to notice a pattern. Each circled destination was a place about to surge in popularity. Travel magazines were predicting record tourism numbers for 2026. These weren't declining ghost towns or politically unstable regions. They were hotspots, which meant if something was going to happen there, it would happen in front of thousands of cameras. I checked the third circle. A desert art installation site in Nevada scheduled to host a massive international festival. Ticket sales already sold out. Attendees bragging about immersive experiences and boundary-pushing environments. Buried in a subreddit was a post from someone claiming to be part of the construction crew. He wrote that the ground beneath one of the stages had a hum, not a vibration from machinery. A hum that continued after generators were shut down. He described it as low frequency, almost subsonic. Others in the thread laughed it off. Then a follow-up comment appeared weeks later from a different account. They moved the stage. No explanation given. My heart was pounding now, but not from fear. From recognition. This wasn't random paranoia. Whoever had marked this map had chosen locations tied to mass gatherings. High visibility. High density. I scanned the remaining circles. A cliffside monastery in Greece reopening to tourists after decades of restoration. A newly discovered cave system in Vietnam fast-tracked for guided tours. An underwater museum off the coast of Japan promoting intimate encounters with submerged history. And finally, a small island in the Caribbean advertising itself as the last untouched paradise. All 7 were projected to trend heavily in 2026. I zoomed out on a digital map and pinned each destination. The points formed no obvious geometric pattern. No straight line. No symbol. But when I overlaid global tectonic plate boundaries, something tightened in my chest. 5 of the 7 sat near fault lines. The others were close to underwater volcanic activity. That still didn't explain the hollow triangle symbol. I searched it directly. Nothing relevant. Just generic warning icons. I tried variations. Military symbology databases. Disaster preparedness manuals. After an hour of dead ends, I switched tactics. Instead of searching the symbol, I searched the phrase taped onto the legend. Non-viable for civilian presence, Q3 2026. One result appeared, a cached PDF from a site that no longer existed. The domain name was a string of numbers. The preview snippet included the phrase, tourism risk modeling. I clicked through an archive service. The PDF loaded slowly, as if reluctant. The document looked official. Charts, graphs, population density projections, climate volatility forecasts. It referenced something called cascading convergence events. The executive summary described scenarios where environmental stressors, geological instability, and human infrastructure overlapped in high-traffic areas. It predicted that certain destinations would become sudden amplification zones. Amplification of what? It didn't say. A section near the end listed sample sites used for modeling simulations. My stomach dropped as I read them. Porto Verrelli, Blackroot Passage, the Nevada Desert Festival Grounds, the Greek Monastery, the Vietnamese Cave System, the Japanese Underwater Museum, the Caribbean Island, all 7. The report concluded with a recommendation: restrict civilian access prior to Q3 2026 to mitigate casualty visibility and systemic panic. Casualty visibility. Not casualties. Visibility. I stared at that word for a long time. Visibility implies optics, public perception, as if the real danger wasn't the event itself, but the fact that it would be witnessed. A noise from the hallway made me jump. Just the neighbor's door closing. I folded the map back along its original creases, but the red circles were burned into my mind. If this was some classified projection, how had it reached me? I wasn't a journalist. I wasn't a government employee. I ran a small travel vlog channel with a modest following. I reviewed budget airlines and hidden cafes. I wasn't influential enough to expose anything. Unless that was the point. My channel analytics showed a spike in traffic over the past week. Unusual geographic sources. Views from regions that didn't match my typical audience. I had assumed it was algorithm fluctuation. Now I wasn't so sure. I checked my email. Nothing obvious. No threats. No warnings. Just collaboration requests and sponsorship pitches. Then I noticed something subtle. 3 of the circled destinations had sent me promotional invites in the past month. Discounted press passes. Early access tours. I had declined due to scheduling conflicts. But what if the invites weren't random? What if someone was tracking which creators accepted? I imagined thousands of influencers descending on these locations in 2026, live streaming every moment. If something catastrophic occurred, it wouldn't be hidden. It would trend globally within minutes, unless someone wanted that. I unfolded the map one more time and looked at the final circled location, the Caribbean island. Tiny, remote, marketed as sustainable and self-sufficient. I searched for recent developments, construction delays, supply chain issues, a vague mention of infrastructure reinforcement. A local forum thread complained about unusual animal behavior. Birds abandoning nests, fish washing ashore. I felt the weight of the envelope in my hands again. Someone had chosen me to see this. Not because I was powerful, but because I was small enough to be dismissed. The map wasn't a warning to stay away. It was a test to see who would go anyway. I realized then that 2026 wasn't about travel trends. It was about convergence. Crowds gathering at precise coordinates under the illusion of adventure. And when whatever was predicted happened, it would happen where cameras were already pointed. The red circles weren't random, they were invitations. I decided to focus on the Arizona National Park first. The red circle marked a remote canyon, far from visitor centers, far from roads. According to the map, the critical date was April 2nd. I arrived 3 days early, hoping to observe the area without interference. Spring was teasing the desert into life. Ocotillo flowers tipped with red, brittle sage brushing against my ankles, the sun dropping shadows at impossible angles through jagged rock formations. I hiked with a purpose, my pack lighter than usual, only essentials, water, notebook, camera. The trail narrowed into a canyon crevice that opened into a broad amphitheater-like basin. The kind of place that felt abandoned, yet magnetic. Nothing unusual at first. Tourists were scattered miles away near the main trailhead. Birds called overhead. But there was a strange stillness on the canyon floor, like the air itself was holding its breath. I set up a small observation post behind a rock ledge and waited. April 2nd arrived with clear skies. At precisely 9:03 a.m., I noticed a subtle distortion in the light along the canyon floor. Dust swirled upward, yet there was no wind. A series of echoes bounced off the walls, not of my own movements, not of birds. Then movement. Figures, small at first, appeared at the edge of my vision. Hikers? But none of them registered on any of the distant trails. Their motions were fluid, almost too synchronized. I held my breath, trying to determine if they were real. I watched as one figure stopped abruptly in the center of the basin. The rest slowed, as if waiting. Then the center figure raised an arm. The others obeyed a rhythm I couldn't see. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Phones and radios had no signal here, not even the emergency channel. By mid-morning, the figures had disappeared without a trace. No footprints. No displaced sand. Nothing to suggest that humans had ever been there. Yet I remembered the map's annotation. Pause. I wrote it down in my notebook, trying to make sense of the synchronicity. That evening, I compared the topography to satellite images. The canyon looked identical, yet subtle anomalies existed. Rocks that were straight on images appeared slightly jagged in person. Shadows didn't align with the sun's angle. I shrugged it off, told myself it was optics, mental fatigue, desert mirages. The next morning, I noticed something on the canyon walls. Marks. Thin, vertical scratches rising 15 feet above the floor, too high for any person to reach. I circled them in my notes and photographed them. By noon, small flocks of birds started circling, not in erratic flight, but in slow rotations, almost like a clock. Their calls were muted. The wind was calm. Something in the desert had shifted. I left the canyon mid-afternoon, keeping my eyes on the walls. By the time I reached the main trailhead, the marks were gone, completely erased, as if the rock had smoothed itself overnight. I kept this to myself for now. Public reporting would have invited ridicule. I had other locations to track. Next was Porto Vercelli. I arrived in Italy a week later, under the guise of a tourism journalist. The town seemed vibrant, sun-bleached streets crowded with tourists, cafes spilling tables onto cobblestones. The harbor reflected gold from the late afternoon sun. My red-circled coordinates were a quiet alley near the town's eastern cliffs. According to the map, the anomaly would occur on April 10th. That evening, the alleys were calm. Residents moved briskly. Tourists chattered. Nothing hinted at anything out of place. I stayed in the alley until nightfall. At 11:17 p.m., the streetlights flickered simultaneously along the row. A hum vibrated through the cobblestones. I had no equipment that measured vibration, but my body felt it. The hum grew, low and resonant, until nearby street signs seemed to pulse subtly. I stepped back, heart pounding. A cat darted from a nearby doorway, its fur erect. The hum stopped instantly. Silence returned. I checked the digital map for anomalies, but nothing registered. There was no report, no notice, not even a police call. I walked back to my hotel and noticed shadows shifting against buildings. Not cast by light, but shapes that seemed to bend physics. Over the next 3 days, I documented everything meticulously. By April 12th, the alley returned to normal. No sound, no vibrations, no shadows. I contacted a local geophysicist, pretending to research subsurface anomalies. He mentioned a minor geological shift last week that had been corrected with minor civil engineering work. He laughed when I asked about hums or shadows. Nothing official. Yet, in my notebook, I had 22 pages of observations. Subtle, yet consistent with the map's warning, do not visit. Japan was next. The underwater museum off the coast had been featured in travel articles for months. Its promotion emphasized isolation and intimate encounters with marine life. I arrived on April 20th, boat chartered under standard visitor permissions. The map marked April 22nd for anomalies. The museum was surprisingly empty, only a handful of researchers and a single dive guide. Underwater visibility was clear. By 3 p.m., while observing a submerged sculpture, I noticed reflections in the water that shouldn't exist. Fish swam at angles that defied normal currents. Light shimmered unnaturally, forming geometrical patterns around the sculptures. My camera recorded none of it. Reviewing footage later, everything appeared normal. Yet the phenomenon was undeniable while observed. The next day, April 22nd, divers reported feeling watched, though no one was near. Equipment malfunctioned, but only intermittently. Compass needles spun. GPS devices drifted by several meters, even when anchored. By evening, the anomaly had dissipated. The museum director mentioned nothing. He looked tired, almost anxious, as if discussing it would invite the wrong kind of attention. Vietnam was similar. A newly discovered cave system, projected to open to tourists in May, had a red circle on April 25th. I arrived early. The cave was cold, damp, echoing with distant water. Inside, walls shimmered with minerals. As I moved deeper, my phone lost signal. Radio devices failed. Then came the sound, a low, guttural resonance bouncing off the walls. It was almost language, but not human. Time distorted. My watch ran fast. Minutes felt like hours. I exited cautiously. The path back was unaltered, though I swore I saw markings I hadn't left. Porto Verrelli, Arizona, Japan, Vietnam. Each anomaly differed but shared patterns. Subtle, unrecorded, public witness minimal, temporal distortions, and recurring sensations of being observed. I began cross-referencing dates. Locations converged in small windows. When multiple anomalies occurred simultaneously, they coincided with crowded tourist activity. Crowds amplified subtle phenomena into perceptible anomalies. I hypothesized that observation acted as a catalyst. Convergence was not natural. It was encouraged by human presence. The Caribbean island was last. Small, untouched, marketed for exclusivity. April 30th. I chartered a private boat, avoiding typical ports. By dawn, the island was eerily calm. Birds were silent. Waves lapped without foam. The map warned, "Do not visit." I walked inland. Palms swayed without wind. Crabs scuttled in predictable patterns, yet some disappeared mid-stride. I reached a clearing where a festival was to be held in May. The ground hummed. I wrote down the coordinates. Nothing appeared. By evening, the sun dipped. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. One tree cast 4 distinct shadows. My camera recorded only one. The map's warning was justified. Subtle, yet absolute. Returning home, I compiled notes. Each anomaly exhibited temporal and spatial disruptions. Public awareness was minimal, yet measurable phenomena occurred. What tied all 7 locations together was convergence, amplification by human activity, subtle alterations of physics, and chronological foresight. The map didn't predict disasters. It marked them. It also acted as a filter. Only the observant, or the reckless, would notice. I started planning the next set of dates, May and June. Kyoto was marked May 17th to 22nd. By then, the anomalies would intensify. I studied weather patterns, cultural events, festival calendars, airline traffic. The more information, the clearer the trend. The map didn't warn. It instructed. It anticipated. Each location shared traits. Remote yet accessible, culturally significant, attracting attention, yet fragile enough to react to subtle influence. I contacted a few colleagues discreetly, framing the research as environmental monitoring. None of them responded. Too risky. Too intangible. I began considering what the map's creator intended. Knowledge of locations, dates, and crowd behaviors implied extensive surveillance. How could one predict events months in advance? Could it be simulation, human, or artificial? The thought unsettled me. If the map was accurate, ignoring it could have consequences. I resolved to continue documenting, yet avoid crowds. Observation without interference. Participation without risk. April 2nd to 30th taught me a critical lesson. Anomalies are not violent by necessity. They are precise, subtle, detectable only to those who look. The human factor is essential. Presence amplifies outcomes. Absence minimizes exposure. And the map, with its red circles and annotations, was both guide and warning. I organized data into tables, graphs, and chronological logs. Each anomaly cataloged with time, location, human presence, environmental conditions, and perceived disturbances. Patterns emerged. Some events were cyclical, some unique. A small group of variables, crowd size, proximity, observation intensity, consistently correlated with anomaly strength. I hypothesized that 2026 anomalies were not singular phenomena, but networked interactions between location, temporal alignment, and human perception. By May, Kyoto would test the model's predictive power. If the map's foresight was real, the city would experience synchronized distortions during festival dates. I prepared equipment, coordinating with local contacts under the guise of tourism journalism. My plan: observe, record, minimal interference. And above all, survive the encounter. Kyoto arrived quietly, almost deceptively calm. Cherry blossoms painted the city in delicate pink, petals drifting like snow. Streets bustled with festival preparations, lanterns strung across alleys, vendors setting up tables with brightly colored foods. The map marked May 17th to 22nd, and I positioned myself near the eastern riverbank, a strategic point where foot traffic converged yet remained controllable. The first 2 days were unremarkable. Tourists laughed, locals went about routines, festival rehearsals echoed along canals. Birds chirped, bicycles clattered on stone bridges. Then, at 9:08 p.m. on May 19th, everything shifted. Shadows detached from their sources. Lamps flickered, but in a sequence that suggested intent rather than malfunction. Pedestrians' movements became subtly asynchronous. One man appeared to walk backward briefly, then seamlessly resumed forward motion without noticing. I documented everything, but cameras didn't fully capture the phenomenon. Digital recording smoothed the irregularities, leaving only faint ghosting. April anomalies had been subtle. This one was bold. By May 20th, small groups of tourists began reporting oddities. Whispers in alleys, fleeting reflections in windows that didn't match angles, objects that appeared briefly then vanished. Authorities dismissed complaints, citing stress or overactive imaginations. Yet the frequency and consistency of reports alarmed me. The map's instructions had been precise: observe, document, avoid interaction. By May 21st, I noticed a pattern. Crowd density correlated with anomaly intensity. Where foot traffic increased, distortions became more pronounced. Where alleys emptied, subtle calm returned. I mapped anomalies spatially, marking shadows, reflections, and audio distortions. There was synchronicity, almost choreography, linking multiple disturbances across the city. May 22nd arrived. Peak festival day. The riverbanks, temples, and lantern-lit streets teemed with people. I stationed myself near the river bridge where anomalies had been strongest during rehearsal days. At 8:57 p.m., the first irregularity manifested. A group of festival performers paused mid-dance, their movements frozen for exactly 17 seconds. When motion resumed, none acknowledged the pause. I counted the seconds, double-checked watches, multiple observers confirmed. The map's red circle had been accurate. Within minutes, another phenomenon. Lanterns floating down the river displayed improbable trajectories. They curved, hovered, reversed, and spun without air currents or intervention. Spectators cheered, assuming a festival trick. I didn't. I recorded the precise positions, angles, and timing. By 9:15 p.m., disturbances became layered, shadow doubling, whispers in alleys, misaligned reflections, spatial echoes. My journal filled with observations, timestamps, and mental notes. This wasn't supernatural in the traditional sense. It was precise, almost engineered. My hypothesis: a system, environmental or artificial, interacting with perception, human presence, and time. The phenomenon peaked at 9:42 p.m. A crowd of 50 people gathered near the riverbank, watching lanterns move as if alive. Pedestrians reported seeing companions where they hadn't been seconds before. The air carried subtle vibrations, not audible, but felt in the chest. I observed one individual whose shadow stretched independently, twisting as if aware of her movements. I kept my distance, recording. A tourist approached, curious about my camera. I deflected with casual explanations. Avoiding interaction was critical. Disturbances seemed to amplify with attention. At 10:05 p.m., a sudden silence fell. No movement, no whispers, no lanterns drifting unnaturally. The crowd froze, sensing the change. Then, abruptly, a low hum emerged, resonating through buildings, streets, and the river. People covered ears, confused, pointing skyward. My instruments detected subtle magnetic anomalies. Nothing violent, but tangible, measurable. The hum persisted for 17 seconds before fading. Observers described feelings of vertigo, fleeting déjà vu, and disorientation. I noted every account, juxtaposed with sensor readings. By 11 p.m., the festival concluded. Anomalies faded gradually as crowd thinned. The map's prediction had been confirmed. This was no accident. Kyoto, May 17th to 22nd, matched coordinates, dates, and intensity projections precisely. April locations had been early signals. Kyoto was a masterclass of pattern manifestation. I left the city quietly, avoiding media attention. Back home, I compiled notes, cross-referencing all observations from April and May. Patterns were undeniable. Temporal alignment, human density, environmental triggers, and precise synchronization across separate sites. Each anomaly interacted with observation. Ignorance reduced effect, attention amplified it. I started theorizing on mechanism. Could subtle geomagnetic fields interact with perception under specific conditions? Could human presence and expectation amplify distortions? I had to explore without attracting attention. June loomed. The Caribbean island, already visited in April, was marked for June 5th to 10th. I returned under the guise of scientific observation. This time, equipment included electromagnetic field sensors, high-definition cameras, audio recorders, and environmental monitors. On June 5th, the island appeared calm. Birds called, waves lapped, vegetation swayed in gentle wind. Yet, at 6:32 p.m., deviations began. Trees bent slightly, leaves flickering against gravity. Shadows stretched inconsistently. Fish in tidal pools moved against currents. Subtle at first, yet undeniable. I documented everything. June 6th, phenomena intensified. Objects drifted, shadows misaligned. Whispers emerged from empty spaces. Humans reported fleeting visions, companions where none stood, brief spatial dislocation. Equipment confirmed anomalies, magnetic fluctuations, air pressure variations, subtle electromagnetic interference. The island seemed alive, yet responding to the presence and observation of humans. June 7th brought synchronized disturbances across multiple locations on the island. High points, low points, and tidal zones exhibited different patterns yet were temporally connected. Distortions manifested sequentially, implying orchestration. The map's annotations made sense. Avoid high density, maintain observation without interference, measure without disruption. June 8th, I observed subtle layering, reflections showing different angles than reality, audio distortions creating phantom voices, and water surfaces curving unnaturally. The phenomenon wasn't hostile, yet precise and deliberate. On June 9th, a storm arrived. Typical meteorology predicted turbulence, high winds, and moderate precipitation. Yet, anomalies persisted. Shadows remained misaligned. Whispers continued. Objects shifted against physics, yet wind and rain patterns followed forecast exactly. Human perception remained affected. Equipment malfunctioned intermittently, compasses spun briefly, GPS drifted several meters. Observers reported transient disorientation, déjà vu, subtle memory lapses. I noted correlations. Anomalies interacted with environmental disturbances, human presence, and observation intensity. June 10th marked the peak. Full visitor density occurred, despite my efforts to limit observation to personnel only. I noticed the subtle synchronization of multiple disturbances, shadows doubling, reflections independent of surfaces, objects moving with precision, magnetic anomalies, whispering audio, tidal shifts. The island demonstrated complex orchestration, possibly intelligent or engineered. I documented thoroughly, avoiding interference. By dusk, phenomena receded. The map's warnings had been validated. Human presence amplified the anomalies. Absence reduced their effect. Precision, timing, and environment were essential. Returning home, I consolidated observations from April to June. Locations, dates, anomalies, human presence, and equipment readings formed a consistent pattern. The map wasn't just predictive, it was instructional. Observation dictated amplification. Ignorance minimized exposure. A framework emerged. Human presence plus environmental conditions plus temporal alignment produced measurable, repeatable distortions. Public reporting remained unwise. Crowds reacted with confusion or amusement. Authorities dismissed anomalies. Exposure remained minimal, perception unreliable, yet phenomena persisted. My goal shifted. Understand without triggering amplification, observe without interference, record without exposure. Knowledge became both tool and protection. July and August marked further predicted anomalies. Locations included remote deserts, secluded mountain trails, and small islands. Red circles appeared on the map. Dates aligned with tourist influx, cultural events, and environmental changes. Each location required careful observation, minimal interaction, and precise equipment placement. I started developing a comprehensive catalog: location coordinates, dates, observed anomalies, human presence levels, environmental conditions, and sensor readings. Patterns solidified. Magnetic interference correlated with shadow misalignment. Audio distortions correlated with tidal and wind anomalies. Visual anomalies correlated with temporal synchronization and human density. The anomalies weren't random. They were systematized, precise, responsive. Hypotheses range from geomagnetic engineering, artificial intelligence manipulation, to environmental consciousness beyond current understanding. Crowds were catalysts. Observers amplified distortions. Absence reduced manifestation. The map served as both warning and guidance. Following instructions minimized risk. Ignoring them invited measurable anomalies. June 10's Caribbean island confirmed predictability, precision, and human interaction as essential variables. Returning from all locations, I began synthesizing data for publication cautiously. Knowledge dissemination risked amplification beyond control. Public engagement could exacerbate effects, turning subtle anomalies into disruptive phenomena. Control required discretion, precise observation, and minimal exposure. The map's role became increasingly clear. It identified hotspots, dates, and mechanisms for anomalies, implicitly instructing observers on safe engagement. Observing without interference became principle. Human presence acted as amplifier. Ignorance acted as shield. Patterns were evident across continents, environments, and cultural contexts. My notebooks, now hundreds of pages, detailed every subtle shift, anomaly, and human reaction. Equipment corroborated subjective perception. Patterns weren't isolated. Kyoto's festival, the Arizona Canyon, Porto Verrelli, Japanese Underwater Museum, Vietnam caves, and the Caribbean island demonstrated consistent rules: time, observation, human presence, environmental alignment. Ignoring instructions increased unpredictability. Compliance minimized exposure. Knowledge became protection. By July, Anomalies extended into new locations predicted by the map. Observations were cautious, methodical. Minimal personnel, controlled environments, redundant equipment. Results consistent. Temporal alignment and human observation dictated anomaly intensity. Each location tested framework reliability. I documented deviations meticulously. No phenomenon occurred outside map predictions. Each red circle, each date, each annotation correlated with measurable, perceptible anomaly. By mid-July, I realized the anomalies weren't just localized, they were evolving. Patterns previously predictable now included subtle variations, slight improvisations, as if the phenomenon was learning, adapting to human observation. A canyon in Nevada produced shadows that not only misaligned but interacted, crossing paths, pausing, retreating, and circling observers without physical obstruction. Tourists reported brief flashes of figures that mimicked movements exactly, yet disappeared when approached. My sensors recorded temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic spikes, and inaudible frequencies. I documented every nuance. Then came the forest in Oregon. It was midsummer, dense canopy, low undergrowth. The map indicated July 18th to 23rd. I stationed myself near a fallen log, a natural vantage. At precisely 7:46 p.m., a subtle hum vibrated the air, accompanied by faint flickering of shadows across trees. A family passed by, unaware of the distortions. Yet, their dog froze mid-step, staring uphill. Leaves rustled unnaturally. Sunlight filtering through gaps appeared refracted, forming patterns that didn't match physical structures. I recorded continuously, taking care to avoid amplification. The dog barked, a single note, yet the bark echoed backward, slightly delayed, not naturally. Tourists laughed, attributing it to echo, but I knew better. By nightfall, the forest seemed alive. Shadows moved independently, whispering sounds persisted, objects subtly shifted. Instruments confirmed magnetic anomalies, slight temperature shifts, and microvibrations in the soil. Observation remained key. Human attention amplified effect. Absence diminished it. On July 22nd, a group of teenagers ventured off-trail, ignoring signage. I followed discreetly. Shadows elongated and coalesced, forming humanoid shapes that blocked paths momentarily, then dissipated. The teenagers, unaware, turned back, citing strange feelings. Observation without engagement remained safe. Interaction risked unpredictable manifestations. My notes emphasized caution. The anomalies were precise, yet capricious, controlled yet responsive, patterned yet adaptive. The map's red circles weren't mere warnings. They were guides to understanding behavior. By July 23rd, all phenomena faded. Equipment returned to baseline. Forest quieted. Human attention left the area, reducing anomalies to subtle, almost imperceptible levels. I compiled data, each location, time, environmental condition, anomaly type, human presence, and sensor reading. Patterns reinforced. Observation dictated intensity, crowd density amplified, compliance minimized risk. Maps, coordinates, dates, all validated through repeated, precise manifestations. Knowledge became both shield and key. Public exposure remained dangerous. The phenomenon interacted subtly with human perception, amplifying when noticed, diminishing when ignored. Returning home, I reviewed months of documentation. Kyoto, Porto Verrelli, Caribbean Island, Arizona Canyon, Oregon Forest. Every location followed rules dictated by temporal alignment, human presence, and environmental conditions. The anomalies were real, consistent, and deliberate, yet their origin remained unknown. I understood one truth: respect the map. Observe, document, avoid interference, and stay cautious. Disturbances are precise, responsive, and powerful. They will not harm directly, but ignorance invites disorientation, manipulation, and subtle temporal displacement. By following instructions, staying aware, and avoiding unnecessary attention, you can navigate safely. The cursed tourist map isn't a myth, it's a guide. The world is stranger than we perceive. Some places bend reality subtly, others collapse distance, time, and expectation entirely. The map shows where, when, and how to observe without being consumed. Travel cautiously, respect boundaries, witness the world's anomalies, but do not provoke them. Human presence matters. Attention magnifies. Ignorance protects. Knowledge is survival. And as I continue documenting these cursed locations, I realize this is just the beginning. Humanity glimpses what lies beyond understanding only occasionally. The map ensures we survive those glimpses. And in 2026, as always, some places are better left unseen, untouched, and unvisited.